What if the person you defended out of kindness turned out to hold the power to rewrite your entire life? The diner was half empty that night, rain tapping softly against the windows as Sophie refilled coffee cups and wiped down counters. She was used to the same tired faces, truck drivers, office workers, dreamers who never left town. But that night a stranger sat in the corner alone, a man in a dark jacket, his face hidden under a cap, his clothes too fine for a place like this, but his eyes tired like someone carrying more weight than he could hold. She didn't ask questions, she never did. A few minutes later, the sound of tires screeched outside. 2 police cars pulled up, lights flashing red across the diner walls. The door burst open. 3 officers stormed in, scanning the room, their tone-sharp evening folks. "We're looking for a man who fled the downtown area, wearing a black jacket and dark jeans." Sophie's heart skipped. They were staring at the man in the corner, the one who hadn't even touched his food. One officer stepped closer to him, hand on his gun. "Sir, stand up, please." The man looked up, calm but cold. "I didn't do anything." Sophie felt her gut twist. Something about his voice sounded too steady, too controlled, like he wasn't afraid of them but didn't want trouble. She stepped between them before she could stop herself. "Wait, he's been here the whole time," she said quickly. The officer frowned. "You sure about that, Mom?" She nodded firmly. "He came in an hour ago, hasn't moved since. Check the cameras if you don't believe me." The officer hesitated, then muttered something into his radio. A moment later, they got a call back. "Negative match, wrong suspect." The team left, muttering apologies as the door shut. Sophie exhaled, shaking. The stranger looked up at her, amused. "You didn't have to do that," she shrugged, wiping her hands on her apron. "You looked like you needed someone too." He smiled faintly. "I haven't needed anyone in a long time." He stood, placed a few bills on the counter and said softly, "Thank you." Sophie blinked, startled. "How do you know my name?" He met her eyes quietly. "You're wearing a name tag." But she swore the way he said it sounded like he'd known it forever. He left, without another word, leaving only the faint smell of rain and something mysterious behind. The next morning, Sophie opened the diner. Just as the first sunlight hit the windows, everything looked the same. The chipped tables, the old neon sign, the smell of coffee. But something in the air felt different. There was a black car parked across the street, sleek and silent. 2 men in suits stepped out, scanning the place like they were guarding a secret. She frowned, confused, until the door opened. And in walked the same man from last night, only this time without the cap and jacket. His posture straight, his eyes sharp and familiar. She blinked twice before whispering, "You've got to be kidding me." The face she'd seen 1,000 times on TV now stood in front of her in person. Adrian Cole, the billionaire CEO whose name carried more power than the mayor's. He smiled faintly. "Morning, Sophie." She froze, clutching her apron. "Mr. Cole, what are you doing here?" He looked around the diner as if memorizing every detail. "You lied to the police for me last night." She swallowed hard. "I didn't lie. I just told them you were here." He nodded. "And that small truth saved me from a scandal I didn't deserve." She frowned. "What scandal?" He sighed. "Some people don't like when power chooses silence over attention." The staff whispered from the kitchen, peeking through the door. Sophie felt her cheeks burn. "Why would a man like you be running from police?" He smiled. "Because sometimes the ones with the most money have the least freedom." He walked toward the counter, placing a black card on it. "This place has potential," he said quietly. She looked at it, confused. "Sir, what is this?" He met her eyes calmly. "It's ownership papers, as of this morning. This diner belongs to you." Sophie's breath caught her voice, barely a whisper. What? She looked at him in disbelief. "Why me?" He smiled. "Because you stood up for a stranger when you didn't have to, and people like you deserve to own something that can't be taken away." Tears welled in her eyes. "Sir, I can't take this." He shook his head. "You already did the moment you believed in me," she whispered. "I don't understand why he'd do this for me." He smiled softly. "Because I used to be someone like you, and no one ever believed in me until it was too late." For the rest of the day, Sophie moved through the diner in a daze. Customers came and went, but her mind couldn't focus. She stared at the papers Adrian had left behind, her name printed where his used to be, her name on the ownership deed of the only place she had ever known. She kept asking herself the same question: Why me? Every answer felt too big, too unreal. When the last customer left, she locked the door and sat in the empty booth. Where he had been the night before, the sound of the rain returned, tapping softly against the glass just like that night, as if the sky remembered him too. She ran her fingers over the paper again, the thick gold seal at the bottom catching the light. When the doorbell rang, she turned startled. He stood there again, the same calm smile on his face. "You came back," she said breathlessly. He stepped in quietly. "You didn't think I'd disappear without seeing what my investment looks like, did you?" She laughed nervously. "I still don't believe this is real." He sat across from her, resting his hands on the table. "It's real, Sophie, the diner, the renovation, the staff bonuses. It's all already in motion." Her eyes widened. "You did all that in one day?" He smiled. "Money moves fast when it has a reason." She looked at him curiously. "Why would you spend so much for someone like me?" He looked at her for a long time, then said, "Because you reminded me who I used to be before the world taught me to stop. Trusting people." She swallowed hard, her voice soft. "You don't owe me anything, Adrian." He shook his head. "Maybe I don't owe you, but I owe the world someone like you, because kindness like yours deserves to be amplified, not forgotten." Outside, thunder rolled softly. He looked around the diner once more and said, "You know, this place could be more than a coffee stop. It could be a home for people who don't have one, for people who need second chances." She stared at him, speechless. "You'd help me?" "Do that," he smiled. "I already am." Weeks passed. The small diner transformed the cracked tiles, replaced the walls, repainted with color and warmth. The new sign above the door read, "The Haven," run by Sophie but funded quietly by Adrian. Together they hired. The jobless fed the hungry, gave warmth to strangers. One night as the diner closed, Sophie found him sitting by the window, a cup of coffee untouched. She said softly, "You gave me a business, a purpose. I don't know how to thank you." He looked at her, smiling gently. "You already did the night you stood between me and those officers. You showed me that even when the world stops believing in good, people still exist." She smiled, her eyes glistening with quiet joy. "So what now?" He leaned closer, his voice low and warm. "Now you keep doing what you do best. Sophie, make people believe again." He stood to leave, but she caught his hand and whispered, "Then stay and believe with me." His eyes softened, the city lights reflecting in them as he smiled for real. This time, if this story made you smile, share it with someone who needs a reminder that accidents can turn into beautiful beginnings.